news. I think they're sort of a venture capital, so this company actually have money, which makes them different from most other open source stuff I've looked at, where it's like some developer comes home from work and then half sleep commits some stuff to some project. So this is sort of different. They actually have a dedicated team that are working like 8-9 hours every day. It's open source under MIT license. There's a team and an enterprise edition. The difference between them is that the team version is completely free, and the enterprise edition comes with support and some other integrations, but the core of it is the same. It's built using some fairly modern technologies, like the backend is written in Go, and they're using React.js and also Node.js, which I thought was interesting because I hadn't looked a lot at those things. And they produce a new major release every month, but they also do bug fixes all the time, often very fast. And basically the reason for auditing it is it's a messaging platform. It's bound to have a lot of sensitive info. It's actually geared toward technical teams, so there's a lot of there's a GitLab version which comes with a lot of GitLab integrations. So you could probably find some pretty interesting info in there. Because it's a messaging platform, it's probably going to be exposed to the internet, because you probably want your teams to be able to access it while they're riding a bus or on site or something. We have a lot of users, and it's growing really quickly. So they told me that so far, something about 100,000 downloads of their Docker image, and most people are probably not running it in a Docker image, so they don't know how many have downloaded the actual source and the precompiled app, but a lot of people. There's also some interesting use cases to this, so I can imagine that someone somewhere is already running this in the cloud, which kind of defeats the main purpose, but so it's basically, it's kind of perfect from a high-level view to be used as a service, which also makes it really interesting. It's open source, which makes it really fun to audit. I have all the code, I have all the server access. That's how I like to do things. And basically to provide some input for those actually considering using it. I've already done that in private to a number of people, which was good. So the platform is basically there's a web GUI that is basically static HTML and React.js, that's all. Then there's an API. This is a really API-heavy app that is written in Golang, and the app is basically one pretty big Linux elf binary, and then some static resources like CSS, HTML, templates, images. And when I first saw this, I was like, are you kidding me? You're running a web app as a binary. That's basically how your Wi-Fi router works. It often dies when you send them really long strings, etc. But this is not really the case here, which I will explain in a little bit. So all the business logic happens in the API, which means that it's really easy for a third party to build an app for it. You don't need to know anything else than how the API works. For a database, you can use MySQL or PostgreSQL, which does not really make it enterprise friendly, because enterprises like really expensive databases like Oracle for some reason. And there are mobile and desktop apps too, so for all the big platforms, not Windows Phone, because that's small. Alright, so I told you that the actual backend and API was one Linux ELF binary. This is written in Go or Golang, so just so you understand what kind of vulnerabilities you will not find in a Golang app. So Golang is an open source language initiative that started by Google. I think there are other people involved now too, but Google still has people dedicated working on it. It's a compiled language, so you actually compile it to native binaries, but it's memory safe, so you don't actually do the memory management yourself, which is nice. There could still be like memory corruption bugs in this kind of app, but it would have to be from a vulnerability in Go itself or in the compiler, something like that. And when you compile this app, you actually get the runtime built in. So the web server and the application runtime is all in the binary, which makes it really hard to get like, it kind of kills a lot of remote code execution vectors, because you can't just upload a file and visit it and get code execution like you can in like PHP or Java. There's no way to like include a file or something like that. There's no serialization issues known yet, at least, but that might come up, but it would be pretty hard since it's in a binary. So that's nice. And they also have some other really nice security features, like they do something called context-based output encoding, in which the app itself can tell when text is echoed back where it's going to end up on a page, and it can encode it according to that context. This makes things like reflected XSS really hard, which is good. So the API is very basic. It's a RESTful JSON web service. You just send post or get requests to it. The API structure is basically API, version number, logical area like teams or users or something like that, and then the API endpoint. It's got a really, really well implemented access model. When you review like APIs, it's very common to find issues where you can access a function that is above your privilege level, or like access data of someone else. I'm not going to say that it doesn't exist here, but I haven't been able to find it, and I have spent quite a lot of time on it, so it's really nice. There are virtually no injection vulnerabilities, because they're using like Go's default libraries, which are really good. There could, of course, be injection vulnerabilities. I haven't found them, and it doesn't look very prone to that sort of thing. There is some information leaks, mainly related to how teams are handled. I will talk a little bit more about that in a while. And it's overall fairly clean. But it has some legacy functionality, some redundant stuff, which can be exploited, of course. And I should also say that I've been looking at version 2.1 and 2.2. Version 3.0 came out on May 16th. So all of these things are actually fixed now. Alright, so let's get into the more fun stuff, features and functionality. If you've seen The Simpsons, this is where Homer gets to, like, he discovers that you can add features to your car, so he starts cooking and learns to DJ while driving. Actually really good. Those are the kind of features we should implement everywhere. Okay, so I'm going to start with some security-related things, because that's always interesting from an audit point of view. So the access control are, you can configure Mattermost to use a couple of different sign-in methods. Local database is the one I've spent most time on. That's basically email and password. There's a GitLab single sign-on that comes with the GitLab version. can use LDAP for the Enterprise Edition, and multi-factor is also part of the Enterprise Edition since the latest version. You can use Google Authenticator, for example. For some reason, this is mainly an observation, they chose to hardcore code the minimum password length. So when you change password, it checks so that the password is at least 5 characters long. So 5 characters is nothing, and this should not be hard-coded. This should be configurable, especially if you're looking to get it into a company, you might have a password policy. But this is, of course, only applicable if you're using the local DB. They're protecting their session cookies with the HTTP only flag, which is nice, because it means in case of a cross-site scripting bug, JavaScript can't access the cookie. But they're also showing something called the access history view, where a user can see all their active sessions. There's something called a session ID there. It's not a cookie. This is not something that is sent to the user ever, and it can be used as a cookie, because why not? So the HTTP only flag is like completely undone by giving people this value in the HTML, because then you can read that and then you can authenticate as that user. This was due to some legacy stuff that I told you about earlier. They actually had a SQL statement that checked both the ID and token columns of the database. Just they removed that. If you are a member of a team and you want to invite someone, you can. There's no way to configure that only certain types of members can invite. You can configure some parts of it, so you can restrict it to specific domains. It's like if you have a company, you can only sign up with an email address for that company. And then you can require email verification, so they actually have to prove that it's their email. And you can, of course, limit it to a single sign service. And there are basically 2 methods to invite someone. Direct invite, which is like an email is being sent from the system to the invited user. And there's also something called a team invite link, which is more interesting because it looks like this. Basically, there is a URL. It has a query parameter called ID, which contains 32 characters. This is a static value, which means that every invite will look like this. The value can be regenerated, but it has to be regenerated manually, so it will never happen. And this means that this can be used as many times as you want. So basically, if we can figure out the value of the ID parameter, we can sign up unauthorized to a team. So the first thing I thought, can I leak this? And of course I can. In a number of ways, actually. This is the most critical one. So when you sign in, there's a post request to the login endpoint of the API, which contains the name of the team that you're signing into, email address, password. Then, because you can be a member of multiple teams, but you're signing into one team. So the user interface needs to keep data of what other teams you're a member of. So then there is automatically a post to the find teams endpoint of the API with a payload of only the email address. And a lot of team data is returned, including the invite ID for each team you're a member of. This call can be done unauthenticated, which means that you find a Mattermost installation, you make this call, and you basically type admin at whatever domain that Mattermost instance is running at. There's a very good chance that you will get an invite ID for a team, and then you can just sign up. So not so good. Once you sign up, you get assigned a role, and you get assigned a member. So this is the default role, can't do very much. Above that is the team admin, you can do team-specific stuff, not very much. And then there's the system admin, who can do everything the team admin can do, and also system-wide stuff. One thing that is good is that none of the admins are like super users when it comes to actually messages. So none of the admins can actually read other people's private messages or anything like that. In that aspect, they're members too. They only have access to what they've been given access to by whoever owns that conversation. Except in one case, which I found, which was pretty funny. When I was auditing source code, I found this file called export.go, and this was kind of interesting because there is no export functionality. So I was, what is this? And then I found this function, which pretty clearly creates a file and returns a URL, presumably to where that file is downloaded. I was like, okay, can it be so easy that I just have to go to this URL? But no, things happen before that. And when I spoke to the Mattermost folks, they were like, yeah, whoops, we started writing that. Someone pushed it to our repository. It's now part of the binary, so you can actually use it. And I figured out after a while that basically everything I needed to do was to call the export team endpoint, which basically triggers the creation of the export and returns the link that we saw, and then make a request to that URL, which returns a zip file containing everything on every team. So all the chat messages, all the invite IDs, no passwords, which is good, but it was still basically everything. So if you consider that your team admin or your system admin should really be able to read your conversations, right? And if this was running as a cloud service, for example, you would probably be given one team and a team admin account to handle your team, and then you have no idea if there are 100 other teams running on the same node. And this would actually enable you to get all of their messages too. So not so good. Crypto. So Mattermost isn't really doesn't support TLS natively, and their official documentation says that you should use Nginx as a reverse proxy. You can run that on the same machine as you're running Mattermost. This is probably a pretty good idea because otherwise SSL configuration and everything would be down largely to the Mattermost people, and I don't think that's something they should be spending time on. They have a really good guide to actually set up Nginx as a reverse proxy, and Nginx is really good, so this is actually a pretty good thing. All of the passwords are stored as decrypt hashes, which are good. They're using word factor 10, which is a little bit too low, I think, but it's still okay. No chat messages are encrypted, as you could see in the previous example. And all the files you share, because file sharing is a big part of it too, are also stored as is on the file system, so no encryption there either. So they're not really using a lot of crypto, and in the places where they are not doing it entirely correctly, as I would show. So, within Mattermost, in the system console, there's a number of salts that they say are used for signing. So there's an invite salt, there's a public link salt, and there's a password reset salt. These are used for generation of random URLs, which are not random. And it looks like this, so 32 characters, also static, but can be regenerated, will probably never be regenerated. These are created when you first start up the app. So if we look at the password reset URL as an example, you can see that it has two query parameters. It has a D and an H. So the D contains things that we kind of know, it's like the current system time and a user ID, which is not secret. And then there's an H, which is a bcrypt hash with a work factor of 10. So if you know how bcrypt works, so bcrypt was created, I think, to protect against rainbow table attacks. So if you get like a password database, you should not be able to crack the hashes by just comparing to pre-generated hashes. So what bcrypt does is that for everything it hashes, it adds a randomly generated salt, and it also stores the salt within the hash itself, so you don't have to bother with that. And that also means that when you actually compare, for example, a password with the bcrypt hash, bcrypt will extract the salt and the work factor and then create the exact same hash. So what they're doing here is basically to generate the H value is that they're taking the value of the D parameter, they're adding a colon and the password reset salt. And I was going like, why? I mean, the password reset salt is a secret, but this is still weird. Why are they doing this? So what it turns out is they're not actually storing the password reset URL. So what actually happens when you visit that URL is that the system checks the value of D, it adds the password reset salt, then it checks the value of H, takes that bcrypt hash, it takes the work factor and the salt, and then it generates a new salt from D plus the password reset salt. And if it checks out, then everything is fine. The user is allowed to change his password. The thing about this is that if you want to brute force the password reset salt, you can modify the work factor to be much lower. You can go as low as 4, which is the lowest bcrypt actually allows, because it's actually compared with what you're telling it to compare with. And the time value, D, I mean, knowing the exact system time, it doesn't really matter because it can be anything. And basically what it amounts to is that if you can figure out the password reset salt, which is available in the system console, so via XSS or shoulder surfing or something else, you actually have a backdoor into any user's account because you can just randomly generate valid URLs. So not so good. I have no idea how long actually brute forcing this would take, so I'm guessing just finding out the password reset salt in another way is a better attack. Okay, so one of the main features of Mattermost is the messaging. Of course, this is done either in channels, which can be open or private, or in direct messages, which is exactly what it sounds like. They support threaded messaging, which is really cool. I don't know if Slack does that, but it means that you can actually follow a conversation. So if you're in a public channel and a lot of people are talking and you are responding to someone, you're having a conversation within that channel, you can actually follow that, like you can on Twitter. It's got supports for / commands, which is when the guy from Guns N' Roses comes in, it goes like, no, it's not. It's like, if you've used IRC, it's like / join and the channel thing, then join the channel. It's also got some rich formatting support, which is like you can embed images and things like that. I found some minor bugs there, but I don't have time to talk about them, and they're not important. One of them is funny, so I might tell you about it later. Another really important part of Mattermost is file sharing. So if you're working on a team, you probably want to, do you have the latest protocol spec of this, or do you have the latest meeting notes, or blah, blah, blah. Then you can upload attachments. Will most likely be like cat pictures, but still, yeah. You can upload any sort of file, and you can preview a number of known file types. These are stored as is under a folder path that's basically based on the channel ID, the uploading user ID, and then a randomly generated string to make it hard to guess. And even if you can actually guess it, you can't access it unless you're a member of the channel or conversation where it uploads. So that's actually really well done. But there's of course a bug in here because file uploads mean there has never been a file upload function that didn't have a bug. So when you upload a file and someone wants to download it, you click on it and you go to a URL that looks a bit like this. So what happens is that the system returns it as an attachment by setting the content disposition header to attachment. But if you check out the last parameter of the URL, it says download equals 1. Basically, of course, changing it to equals 0 will mean that if you have uploaded something like an image or something that a browser can render, it will render it. It will not pass it as an attachment. So you can execute HTML, which means that you get stored cross-site scripting, which is kind of bad. People aren't really giving that sort of bug the attention that it needs, because there's a lot of things that you can do. I'm going to show a really quick example. So demo time, right? So here is attacker at hacks.nl who is logging in to Mattermost. As you can see here, he doesn't have a lot of permissions. You can basically go to account settings, or you can invite a team member, but that's about it. He's going to do this social engineering attack at an admin, so he's uploading a file like this. There's a way to do this without anyone actually seeing that a file has been uploaded to a channel that you are a member of, but that takes a bit of time, so I don't really do that. Then he gets the link, and he goes to the admin, and he says, hey admin, check out this German guy. I can't spell, but never mind. I'll change that to 0. So the admin actually has a fetish for German guys. So he will bite immediately. So he goes like, cool. This is Jörnchen, who Date told you about. This is actually a colleague of mine, very German. Right, so he was like, yeah, that was a pretty German guy. I like it. I'm saving this image. So the attacker, because we're back at the attackers, he does like this, and voila, system console, admin writes, okay, cool. Let's go back to that. So that's basically a very easy way of actually, because an admin or any user within an application like this will assume that everyone else who is in this application should probably be there, especially if you're running it within a company. It's like, I don't know this guy, but he's probably kind of legit. So, moving to the desktop client. There's a desktop client. It exists on Windows, OS X, and Linux. It's pretty much exactly the same client, only different binary. It's written in Node.js, which kind of surprised me. It's like, if you don't know, Node.js is an application runtime for running JavaScript on the server. It's very different from a browser, because when you run JavaScript in a browser, you're fairly restricted to what that JavaScript can do by the APIs the browser exposes. This does not apply to Node.js. By default, it can do pretty much the same kind of things as Java runtime or PHP runtime. As a side note, after I looked at this, I actually found out that there is a ton of desktop apps like this, including Slap, which also runs on Node, written with the same framework and everything, and this is basically my new research project. That's where I'm starting. So what the desktop client does is it basically pretends to be a web browser. It behaves exactly the same as the web. If if you look at like the traffic, it's the only thing that is different is that it doesn't load any JavaScript over the network. It has them locally, and it also has another user agent, but that's it. So not really that much to see, right? Yes, there is, of course. So I told you that it behaves like a web browser, and it basically is a web browser. But the Mattermost people don't want people using it as a web browser. So when someone posts a URL in a chat, this will be rendered as clickable, but it will check, when you visit the URL in the web browser, it will actually check, like, is this an internal URL within Mattermost? And if it is, I'll open it in the desktop client, and if it's not, it will invoke a shell and open it in your default browser, which is good. But this is a kind of dangerous assumption, because they're assuming that untrusted HTML will never be executed by the desktop client. So if we can do that, we will have code execution on Windows desktop or something. So anybody have any idea how we could actually do that? We did it a couple of minutes ago, actually. Stored XSS is untrusted HTML. So another demo, because we need to do demos. Otherwise, how could things go horribly wrong? Right, same attacker, uploading another file. Right, getting link, writing a message to the admin. And the admin will definitely buy it this time, because last time the attacker sent him like this sweet German guy. Let's just remove everything. Like that. So basically not in the browser, but in the desktop client. And go to that one. So it picks it, and it's like, oh, this is a cool math problem. Unfortunately, he also pops the calculator, which is like default remote code execution thing. In a real life scenario, I would probably have installed malware or something, but popping calc is cool. So it's basically the most dangerous application on Windows. All right, so conclusions. So despite of what I've been saying here, I'm actually a big fan. I really like this product, it's really nice. I really like the idea of having my chat messages on my server, actually knowing where they are. And as I said, all of these things are in version 2.1 and 2.2. Version 3.0 was released on May 16th. They have made huge improvement with regards to security. They're actually using crypto the way it should be used. They've cleaned up the API, so a lot of the things that I found were due to like redundant functions and things like that. They've actually made that much better. They removed a ton of stuff. They're handling the team separation much better, which really limits the way you can leak something. And they've removed all the sensitive data from the system console. And what I especially like is that they have actually done a root cause analysis of everything, so that I've actually discovered, like, after a while, like, this bug also exists over here. Okay, I'll tell them, and they've been like, yeah, we know. You reported that. And I was like, no, I didn't. No, but it was implied. So they've actually done a really good job there. So version 3, I highly recommend it. Some improvements that I would like to see. I would like to at least have database encryption, like chat messages, optional. I don't know how much performance overhead and everything that would make, but I would like the option to turn that on. And also, right now, all the teams are in the same database table, which is not so good if you're running different teams that need different sort of, backups maybe, or they're there's a policy that says that certain data must be stored in a certain way. And also they've been really, really good to work with. So I was actually named as one of the top contributors for the latest version, which is ridiculous because I haven't really done that much. I certainly haven't written any of the code they use. So. And they also tweeted this to me, which was really nice. They really didn't have to do that. And they told me several times in private that we're so happy that you don't speak about us as security person. I'm like, do you realize what I'm going to say? And they were like, yeah, it's great. Security is awesome. So it's like they're not afraid of people actually doing this either. So it's really good. If you want to take a look at it yourself, I highly recommend it. So that's all. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Yes. Raise your hands and Jesper will come running.
This works? Yeah.
You said that you've seen people putting it in the cloud already. Have you found any Mattermost instances on Showdown yet?
I haven't seen anyone putting it in cloud, but it kind of becomes cloud prepared. You can configure it to use Amazon instead of local file storage, etc. But I mean, the thing is that the servers will still be yours. I haven't seen anyone use it in the cloud, but I highly doubt that someone hasn't done that. I haven't looked at Showdown, but maybe I should.
Anyone else? No? All right. Thank you so much, Andreas.
Thank you.